So it's lesson 8. Today we're going to kind of finish our shopping cart, and then we want to get into registration and checkout on our music store. So I've just launched mine. Tried to launch mine. I've got to clean something out here. Just fix that up. Wait for a second. I'm going to have to rebuild. So last week we added the ability for users to add to the shopping cart. We created the shopping cart model, and we created a shopping cart view model that we used so we could create our own custom strongly typed object and display that on the shopping cart page. For some reason, my files from last week don't seem to be included. So I'll just fix that up here. I think my cart link has disappeared. I may have to fix that. Yeah. All right, let's try again. To run under HTTPS as our startup, which we need because our Microsoft login won't work unless we're using HTTPS. It will locally, but it won't live. So we're kind of best to force our SSL. So here's where we left off. The cart should be empty, which it is. We had built this page so we can go to the cart, but we added add to cart functionality. Oh, hang on, I just have to update my view. Under store. Browse page. So we added these add to cart links. So we can add items. Right, if I added the same item, we'd increment the count. So one thing we should also add is we should add the ability to remove items from the cart. Now, ideally, the way I'd like to do this is using jQuery and Ajax, so that we could actually remove an item and have this section of our page refresh without the entire page reloading. Not sure if we're going to have time to implement it that way. I think first we'll implement it where we remove and we just reload the whole page. But there are benefits to using Ajax and jQuery for that. Why might we want to do that as opposed to removing and reloading the whole page? Sorry? It's faster for the user, yep. Well, we'll refresh it automatically, so they won't have to. We'll redirect them and reload. But it's faster for the user. There's also a benefit to the site owner. What's the benefit in only updating the section of a page that needs to be updated? I mean, we don't have a lot of other content on this page. But if, let's say, this is Amazon, there's lots of other stuff on here besides just the shopping cart. So what's the benefit to just updating a section of the page rather than reloading everything? Yeah, redundancy. And the big one is bandwidth, right? If we reload the whole page, everything on the page has to get reloaded. Well, that's adding to their hosting cost, right? Because they're paying. So if we can only re-render this part, great. So we may or may not have time to do that. We'll do it first, or we just reload the whole thing. If we have time to then add that Ajax implementation later, we will. If I didn't have time in yesterday's class, if we don't, what I will do is I'll do it outside of class, and I'll film it as a video and put the code online. Okay, so if you want to see how to implement that, I'll do a version of that. So the first thing we want on our shopping cart index is we want a remove link here. So let's open up our shopping cart index view that we wrote. So inside of views and shopping cart, we've got index. So we've got 3 columns right now in our table, and let's add a 4th column. So we'll add a remove link. So our link will say remove. And a call a method, which we will write, called remove from cart. And we can put this also where our add method is, which is our shopping cart controller. Now that remove from cart method is going to need one piece of information. It's going to need a parameter. What parameter are we going to need to pass to the remove from cart method? Yeah, we need to know what album are we removing. So there's our whole link. Our link will say remove. It will call the remove from cart method in the shopping cart controller, and it will pass in the current album ID. So if we refresh our shopping cart, now we should get links running down the right side of our grid. We'll just save and have a look at that. And as I mouse over, you can see the album ID appearing in the bottom left of my browser in the status bar. So the album ID is being passed, which we can see down here. We have this funky little border here because we don't have an empty table cell at the bottom. We should probably just add, like we have here, let's just add a blank cell. Then later on, we'll put a checkout button here. So we may as well create the cell now. We'll add the checkout button later. So down in our footer row, let's just add one more empty column at the bottom. That'll get rid of that kind of strange looking border. That kind of cleans that up. So we can click one of these, but they're just going to generate a 404, right? It's going to link us off, send us off to shopping cart / remove from cart / ID. But we have no method to handle this request yet. The other thing that may be helpful as we do this, as we're kind of talking about the cart management, I'm going to log into my database. And as we're kind of messing around with the cart today, I want to keep an eye on what's in there. So here are the items. Here are the things I just... Oh, I guess that's somebody else. Someone else is obviously taking mine off GitHub and using my database, which is okay. So these are me here. I can tell because I've got 2 of album 392 and 1 of 396. So we should keep an eye on what's happening. Things we're going to have to think about. So right now, I'm shopping anonymously, right? I'm not logged in, so we generated a globally unique ID to track my cart. We talked about this last week. But what happens if before I check out, I decide to log in and then I keep shopping, right? We'll need to figure out, because once a user's logged in, we want to associate their cart with their username instead. So we're probably also going to need a function that when someone logs in, we should check if there is already a current active cart. And if so, we then want to tie those items to that user. Right? As much as possible, the owner of our store wants cart items that look like this rather than ones that look like that. Why is this of benefit to the customer, to the store owner, if they can identify as much as possible the users in the carts?
Identify demographics more easily, whereas the other values are just numbers.
Yeah, we get all kinds of business intelligence that way. Plus, here, right, my cart is going to be persistent. If I can tie the shopping cart to a user, that user puts stuff in their cart and doesn't check out. If they come back and log in again, from the contents of the cart. With an anonymous user, I can't persist their cart from one session to another. But I can if I know who the user is. So there's a better chance they're going to buy stuff that way. And I can upsell them. I can target them with promotions. I can do a lot of things. Okay, so we clicked here. We now need our remove from cart method in our controller, and then we'll need a remove from cart method in our model as well. Actually, we may or we may not. We definitely need it in the controller. So let's open up our shopping cart controller. That we built last week. Sorry, would help if I open the right file. Thank you. So we didn't scaffold, we just wrote these 2 methods last week, right? We wrote the index method that gets the cart and hands it to the shopping cart page, which also includes both the items and the total. So we use the view model, which was a strongly typed object. So we could take pieces from different places and stick them together as one object and hand it to our view for display. Then we wrote our add to cart method. So now we need a remove from cart. You get but just like with our add, we're passing in an album ID. So the easiest way to do this is we can simply use we do have a built-in cart model, right? When we used Entity Framework to generate all our models, we have a cart model. We really haven't worked with it much. But it has all of the CRUD methods baked into it, just like every other model. So we want to call a remove function on our cart model and pass in the album ID so that it, well, does one of two things. It either, if the count is 1, we want to remove it entirely. If the count is greater than 1, we just want to reduce the count by 1. So it's not fully a remove, it's a remove one item at a time. And if we only have one, then it's a full remove. And then we'll just reload. We'll just redirect to the index view. So the whole cart page will get refreshed when we're done. So we'll get the current cart, just like we did in add. We'll remove. Actually, I guess we'll have to say the quantity of selected album is greater than 1. We'll subtract 1 from the quantity. Otherwise, remove this album. So these are our steps involved. Access the current cart, figure out how many of these we have. If we have more than 1, change the count to just subtract 1. If we only have 1, just remove it entirely. And then just redirect. So step 1 is going to be exactly the same in add to cart and remove from cart. Get the current cart. We talked last week about this HTTP context object. What's the purpose here? Why are we passing this object in when we call our get cart method? Yeah, because it contains many subclasses, one of which is the user. Our model has no access to the HTTP context otherwise. We have to explicitly hand it to the model. So now we can check inside of the cart, we want to check for this album ID. And well, we know it's in there. Basically, we need to know if the count is there. We need to know if the count is greater than 1. I'm just going to think about the best way to do this. So we have our cart. And look, we did it yesterday. It was fairly efficient. So just bear with me for a second. I'm going to do it the same way. A little different than how I planned it out. Okay. Well, so we wrote an add to cart method in our model. We may have to do the same. It's okay. We can do that. We'll actually write it. In fact, I'm not sure this method even needs to return anything. Maybe we can leave that for now. We'll let our shopping cart model do it instead. We'll keep it simple. We'll get the current cart. We'll write that remove from cart. We'll put it next to our add to cart method in our model. Reload. So we're going to have to generate. I was complaining here. But we can actually get it. It says, hey, you don't have the shopping cart class doesn't have a remove from cart method. Do you want to generate one? Sure. I'll just click this. So again, the way I got that, mouse over my little error. I get this little yellow light bulb here. Here's an idea, click it. Do you want Visual Studio to generate a method with this name in this class? Yes, I do. So I'll just double click that. And my error goes away. Now I can right click and go to the definition. And it just added that in our model. We're going to change a couple things. It defines it as internal. We want it to be public. I'm going to use Pascal case. I'm going to change album ID. And then we can take out, obviously, the exception it throws, generates the method, but error. So there's our method signature. What we want to get for the current shopping cart and the current album. They've got 10 items in their cart. We don't care about the other albums, just the one they want to remove. So we'll initialize a variable to 0 that will tell us how many of these albums the customer currently has in their cart. So if the item count is more than 1, we're going to decrease it. If they put 4 in their cart, we're going to change the count from 4 to 3. Otherwise, we're just going to remove this record entirely from the database. commit that transaction, whether it's doing an update or a remove, we just call save changes. Now, later on, if we get a chance to do this with Ajax, we'll probably want to, in the method, we'll actually want to return the current item count. So because we'll need to send that back to the view. Because we're just reloading the page and the whole page is going to query the entire cart again, we can skip that for now. So if we build our solution now, let's build and try to remove something from your cart. Good point. We don't actually even need this. I'm checking the wrong thing. Thank you. It's not item count. It's item dot count, right? So it's the object we've created from our database query. We're checking if in the database the count is greater than 1. Thank you. So either way, we're committing a database transaction. It's just here we're doing an update and here we're doing a delete. So let's try this, and we'll have to try both scenarios of multiple quantities of and an album that we have one quantity of. We may have to modify this a little bit. We'll see. So I'll reload my cart. First, I'll try removing my single item. Because I'm not logged in, it kills my... So I'll add this. I'll add 2 of that, and I'll add 1 of a couple others. I'm going to try this one first. So this should change to 1, and my page should reload, and hopefully our total will get updated as well. All right, so that seemed to work in going from 2 to 1. Now what happens if I remove the album entirely? So that's the result that we want. I know it's not ideal. Normally we would just let somebody change the actually specify a different quantity. For simplicity, this is probably good enough. So again, here's the method in our shopping cart model. And our shopping cart controller, I'll just jump here for a minute, I'll put the model back. We just get the cart, call remove from cart, reload our index view. Are there any questions about the methods as we've written them, or how this should work? I can show you briefly the client-side version of this. We'd still need these methods in the back end. But rather than redirecting, what we would do is we would remove from the database, and this method would simply send back a new list of all of the contents of the shopping cart as a JSON object, a JavaScript array. So the code is actually here on Blackboard. I can show you quickly what it looks like. If we have time to implement at the end of class, great. So I included it in the week 8 folder. So here's the gist of what would happen on the front end. We'd need to use jQuery. Excuse me. We would need to attach a bunch of class definitions to many of the things in our shopping cart page. Because by attaching classes, we can call JavaScript events and we can modify those HTML elements. So our remove links or our remove buttons would all get a class of remove link, meaning whenever any one of those was clicked, it would run this function. To attach some attributes to each row, because we might maybe need to either update the quantity in a row or remove it entirely if that row is gone. We'd also have to add a class to the cart total field so we could update that in effect in real time. So the way that jQuery and Ajax works is once any remove button was clicked, we would be identifying which row it was in, right? So which one of these was clicked. And then instead of actually calling, so what happens right now, right? This is actually a link, and it loads the remove from cart method in our browser. By using jQuery and Ajax, we're still calling that URL, but it's like a hidden call. And we didn't use post, we used get instead. So we're not actually taking the user off to a different page, we're simply making a call to a remote URL without things changing in the browser. So we did this in our PHP class. PHP is a library called curl, or CURL, that allows us to make an HTTP call to any other URL, either within our own application or somewhere else. So we would call the remove from cart method, pass in the album ID, and then this data, that's what comes back out of our method. So that's going to be JSON. So our new cart contents will get rendered as a JavaScript array. And then we would update, potentially if our item count was 0, we would use jQuery to fade out to make that row automatically disappear. Otherwise, we would be updating the count from whatever it previously was to that number -1. And then we would be retotaling. One of the questions somebody asked in yesterday's class, I said, okay, so you can use JavaScript to call a remote URL. With CURL, can we do it with ASP.NET, right? How do we have an application that makes a remote call out without taking our user somewhere else? Or maybe it's an API, so there is no user interface. So ASP.NET actually has this class for doing this. Actually, it's the HTTP web request. So it's documented here. So we pass in some URI. We can authenticate. And then we specify what content type, whether we're sending JSON, whether we're sending XML, whether we're sending plain text or HTML. We can send headers. So for example, we want to send a username and password because the request we're making requires authentication. We can put those things in a header. The method, so are we sending a get or a post, a delete or something else? And then we get some kind of response back. So here's a sample. I've actually used this. So here's a web application I had where when a user's logged in, what we wanted to be able to do was automatically log them into another website without them having to enter their credentials twice. Created an API. So in my application, a user could just click login. I didn't have to give them a separate login screen. They just had to click a button, say, take me over to there. So what we did was behind the scenes, use this HTTP web request, set up a path to the URL, passed in the user ID, and here's how it looks. So we were doing a get method and sending them JSON, and we sent in some kind of authorization token in the header. So this is all hidden. The user doesn't see any of this. They just click a button and all this happens kind of under the hood. So we send this method off to this remote URL. We get a response back that's a JSON object, and then we have to parse it and see whether they've accepted this request or not. So pretty much any kind of web language has the ability to make remote HTTP calls, and ASP.NET C# is no exception. So that's in effect how jQuery works. So same, if this is typically how we integrate APIs with jQuery, right? Like let's say we want to, we want to show a stock ticker in real time. So the Toronto Stock Exchange or the Dow Jones probably has an API that we can call with JSON. So we could just do a get or a post to tsx.ca/get current quotes. So we keep the user on our site, but behind the scenes, we can call that URL. And we fetch back a bunch of JSON data, which we can then parse and render on our web page, on our mobile app, on something else. So if we have time to implement this later today, we will. If not, as I said, I'll video it. So our remove seems to work. At least it's good enough for now. We'll probably have to modify the methods we wrote a little bit if we're going to use the Ajax method.
Why are we using?
We could use post. Really doesn't matter which method you use. Typically, post is used when we're submitting new information to be saved, which we're not doing. Right? We're running a delete. So if we wanted to set it up as post, we could. All we would have to do, we'd have to do a couple of things. First of all, in our controller, we would need the HTTP post decorator here. Actually, I think that's the only thing we'd have to do. Okay. And then we could just use post. It'd be fine if you want to use post. Doesn't matter. I don't typically use post unless I'm adding data.
I just remembered the PHP class last year. I mentioned post card values other than reading.
Well, we actually have probably the most descriptive would actually be to use this instead. Use HTTP delete, because that's actually what we're doing, right? We're potentially removing a record. So it would probably, to me, make more sense if we weren't going to use get to actually use delete. HTTP get is the default, so we don't specify it, have to specify it, because that's the default. But you could use any of those methods. So on here now, we want to start, our cart's basically done. So let's add a checkout process. So on here, we want a checkout button. When the user clicks checkout, we want to take them to a new view that asks them to fill out their customer information. And then we're not going to be able to do payment. We'll just kind of simulate a payment. We'll give them a promo code, and they can just enter that promo code, which will validate it. If they put in that promo code, we'll save their order. We'll give them a promo code of free. We can talk a bit about payment. We may have time to play around with it a little bit, but I doubt it. The other thing is, up till now, right, I'm still anonymous. I can get to here without having to log in. But our next page should require authentication. So you can shop as an anonymous user, but once you go to start the checkout process, you either have to register or log in at that point. We're not allowing guest checkout. Convenient for customers, it's not so good for business owners. They want you to create an account if they can. So on our shopping cart index, we created this fourth column, and my cursor is actually flashing right where we want our checkout button to go. So in our footer row, remove links, let's add a checkout button. We'll add an HTML action link. It says checkout. It'll call a method. We'll call it address and payment. We'll build a method for this, and we'll build a view for this. Fortunately, we can use scaffolding, so building that view will be really simple. We'll use scaffolding, we'll just have to make a few small changes to it. But we don't have to build that from scratch. And I'll show you how we can scaffold that. So that can go, we may as well use our existing shopping cart controller. We don't really need a new controller for this. Our fourth parameter is a null. We don't need to pass any information here. Our fifth parameter, we will, just so that our button looks a little different. Actually, sorry, we'll do it like this for now. We'll see how it looks, and then I'm going to add one thing to it, just for style purposes. If it says checkout, it should appear in the bottom right-hand corner of your shopping cart. If you click it, you'll get a 404 because it's going to try to load the URL shopping cart / address and payment. So just refresh your cart. Your checkout link should appear. Click on it. You should get a 404. The only other thing I want to do is I want to make this look, rather than just look like a link, I want to add a border, make it actually a button so it stands out a bit more from our remove. So that's the result we'll get. I'm just going to add on a null parameter here. We're not passing any values. I'm going to use Bootstrap as the fifth parameter here so that I actually get an actual button, which has a border. Optional, you don't have to do this. It works fine without that class. Now we'll get our address and payment view set up. And then we'll take a break, and then we'll make it functional and actually work on saving orders to the database. We'll do that after we take a break. So we're almost there. So adding this should give that button shape to that object. Actually gives it that way. I think that's probably better. Stands out a little more. We do want to draw attention to it because that's the whole goal for the site. That's why we got paid. That's why we're building this thing, because somebody wants people to buy stuff in their store. So it should be very apparent. Go here, click this. This is the clearest thing on the page. So we're going to build an address and payment method, render a view called address and payment. So we can kind of scaffold this out. This would be pretty simple. So go to your shopping cart controller, and we're going to write an address and payment method that just returns a view with that same name. So setting up this method and creating this view will be, we're going to ready. So the get's easy. We'll deal with the get first. We'll deal with the post after lunch. So all we need to do here is return a view with that same name. We don't need to go to the database. We don't really need to do any processing. We're just using this to load the next page. After. So just build, because we need this method to get added to our DLL. And then we're going to use scaffolding to generate this view. Changes to it, and then we'll take a break. So we've looked at 4 of the tables in our store. When we originally set up the music store, we got 6 tables. Which is order and order detail. Here's the properties, right? Order ID, date, username, and then all the customer info. So we can scaffold a view based on the order model, and it's going to build a form. We can build a form based on this without having to create it manually. We won't want on the form, we can remove them, and then we'll also want to add some friendly names. But this is pretty easy. So inside of views and shopping cart, right-click your shopping cart subfolder, and we want to add a view. We're going to call it address and payment. That's the function we're calling. We'll call it address and payment. So again, inside of views and shopping cart, right-click, make a new view. The template we want is, well, it could be edit or create, really. It doesn't really matter because we want it to build a form in either case, which it will do. And now it says, okay, what model? Is there a model here? Yeah, we want this tied to the order model. By doing this, scaffolding will generate all of the fields in the order table, few that we don't need. Make sure your data context, it should default to your music store model, and your template should default to your layout. If not, you can just choose those 2 options. Choose your music store model and choose your view shared layout. And then you can just add your view. Then if you go back to your cart and click checkout, you now should get a form that has most of the input fields of the stuff we need to ask our customer. So I'll just click add here. And we'll let Visual Studio build this page. We can have a look at it, maybe make a few changes, and then we'll take a break. So I'll just save this. I won't change anything. So it's based on our order model. So now if I tried to check out, make sure you recompile because we modified the controller. So it's not perfect, but it saves us a lot of work. It's a pretty good start. The beauty of the scaffolding saves us a lot of time. So obviously there's a few things we should change on here. What would you change? Okay, yep. What else would we change?
Order.
Sorry?
The order in which the fields are going. Like you got email down at the bottom.
Okay.
I'm just throwing shit out there.
Okay. What else would you change? If you gave this to a paying customer, they're going to look at this. What other things are they going to say? You got to change that. Okay, where should the order date come from? Should the customer enter their order date? No. So what should happen with that section? It shouldn't even be there, right? We're gonna timestamp it ourselves. So that field can be removed. Yep. What else would you change? Yep. The username field we don't need. We're going to pull that automatically because we're also going to require the user to log in by this point. So we're going to know who they are. If they don't have an account, they're going to have to create one. So we have the username in the user.identity.name. We're just, when we save the order, we're going to plunk that in. So we can get rid of this. We can probably get rid of the email as well because the email and username are going to be the same. Right? So we'll auto-populate those things. The total we're also generating. We're not going to let them put in the order total. We're calculating the order total. So we can get rid of those 4 things. Even our title up here is a little wonky. So let's just quickly fix all those things, then we'll take a break. And then also we should change these little display names. We should at least put spaces in. So we can modify our order model with the display name property. So wherever it says first name, last name, postal code, there's a space. So the first thing is, I'll put in a space here in both the title and my heading. This little H4 that says order, one heading that says address and payment is enough. Remove that. And now I'm going to remove order date. I'm going to remove username. So those are the first 2 form group sections. And then I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. I'm going to remove email and total. We'll remove this back to list that the scaffolding generates. So this little div here, it can go. Makes no sense here. And on my button, we'll change the text from save maybe to something like complete order. So get rid of the first 2 sections of the form, the last 2 input sections. Change the button to say complete order. Title says address and payment. Now we have a much simpler form, right? We've only given them what they need. And just to fix these up, we can just go into our model quickly and add display name attributes for all of the multi-word properties so that they look better on our views. If I go into models and order, so the order ID, we're not showing it on this page, but after they check it, we're going to want to show them like an order page. And the very first thing at the top should be their order number, right? That's what you're going to want to see as a customer. What's my order number? So if I don't get my stuff, I can call you and I know I have a way to reference I've taken my money. So order ID is not a very friendly name. So let's just set up a display name equals. Customer is going to want to probably call it order number. Order ID is more of a technical term. User's not going to refer to their order that way. Order date, let's just put a space in it. And let's put spaces in first name, last name, and postal code as well. So these things, when we build these changes on our scaffolded form, will automatically get updated. This is optional, but we're trying to polish this up a bit. We'll add a space for both first name and last name. Order date, first name, last name, and postal code is the other one.
Do we change the?
Up to you. That's fine. If you want to change it, by all means change it. But I've just added those 5 display name attributes. You're free to customize yours however you see fit. You do need to build in order to see that change. So you just see that those labels got updated. Now, yeah, we probably want to add a drop-down list for state or country. We'll leave that out for today. But this looks closer to what an actual functioning production level app is going to look like. Right? We got rid of everything we didn't need. We've tried to make this more descriptive, look cleaner. Okay, I'm going to stop our video for part 1. I will push everything we've done so far to Git. At least I will try. I did have a bit of an issue. And then when we come back, we'll finish this. We'll write the HTTP post. We also need to make sure that we're authenticating users. They can't get here. Right now, it's public. I'm still anonymous. I'm not logged in, and I can get here. So we're going to want someone to log in. And then if they've shopped anonymously, we also want to move their cart under their username and then save their order and display a confirmation page. So we'll do all of that after the break. We'll come back at 20 to 1.